Today is January 9, 2015. I am Arthur Seymour, Jr. I am here at the law offices of Frantz, McConnell, and Seymour in Knoxville, and I'm going to be interviewing Francis A. Cain, also known as Snake Cain, about his life and his legal career. Francis, or I'm going to call you Snake, as everybody else does while I'm talking to you. I'd like for you to tell us a little about your life and your legal career. And I think it would be best to go in a chronological order. And first, would you tell us where you were born and where you grew up?
I was born in Knoxville, and I grew up on West Clinch Avenue, which is now known as Fort Sanders area. We were right. Our house still sitting there. My sister lives in it, and it's right below, literally below Fort Sanders Hospital.
All right. What year were you born?
1937.
All right. And who were your parents?
James L. and Daisy P. Cain.
What did your father do?
He worked for the railroad. I'm told that was during the Depression years. I wasn't around then. And then he worked for Sturkey Brothers as, I think his title was General Traffic Manager, but he did a lot of other things. He was Safety Director. I don't know if they called him that back then, but then he retired from there.
How about your mother?
Homemaker.
All her life, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And you had one brother and one sister.
Older sister and older brother. They were 14 in 3 or 4 months and 13 in 2 or 3 days, years older than I.
You were the first lawyer in the family, weren't you?
Yeah, no other lawyers. I didn't even know a lawyer.
All right. And you grew up there on West Clinch Avenue and lived there until you got married or went away to school, didn't you?
Yeah, yes I did. I came back to, well, Patty and I lived there a short period of time after we got married before we could get settled in. But
where did you go to grammar school?
Van Gilder.
And I bet there are a lot of people that might be watching this that have never heard of Van Gilder. Was that a neighborhood school?
Well, it was, but it was at least a mile from where I lived. It was on the corner, basically, of 13th Street and Highland Avenue, and the back side of it up to Bridge Avenue. And it was the equivalent in the sense of the school you went to, Staub, which was on the other side of Cumberland. They were both about the same size and similar dynamics, and then of course they both merged along with others to the Tysonian Institute of Higher Learning, the School of Knoxville Mayors, as you know.
Yeah. Van Gilder was a small school, though, wasn't it?
Yes, I would say it had. Yeah, I've wondered about that over the years, but it has obviously had 6 grades, and every grade had 2 teachers. So I'm guessing it had probably 250, 300. It was about the same size as Staub, so with
small classes.
Yes.
And well-known, well-respected teachers.
Yes, all of them were old.
Well, they're all old when you're in grammar school.
Yes.
Do any of the teachers over there stand out in your mind, Miss Brazil?
Yeah, Miss Brazil was everybody. She was the most popular teacher and the prettiest teacher. I thought many of those teachers were really were older because of the war years and that time. And I think that had something to do. Then Ms. Richards and
Miss Williams.
Miss Williams, who Miss Richards was principal, but later she retired and Ms. Williams became principal. But I was long gone from there. But she, contrary to your father's thoughts, she was a great teacher. I remember I told him one time, I said, "Bud, she was a really good teacher. I'll have to take your word for it." He had some run-ins, I think, over the KTL. She didn't approve of the scheduling of the bus services, but Yeah, those are the three that I remember, and then of course I forgot who was. There was a teacher that I can't remember, second grade at Tida. This was great. We had a kid that was just kind of rambunctious, and she tied him in his chair one day in the second grade. Now, I don't know you could get away with that now, but she did.
Probably not.
And it was done in properly so, as I recall.
After Van Gilder, where did you go to school?
Tyson Junior High.
All right, the building's still there.
Van
Gilder is no longer there.
No, Van Gilder and Staub, in effect, merged to form Fort Sanders Elementary, which is one block below where I lived. It did not last long as a general elementary school. It became a special education school, but that was a merger, you might say, and I think that was probably in the late 50s.
All right. You went to Tyson for the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, didn't you?
Yes.
And, of course, Tyson as a school no longer exists, but the building is down there on Kingston Pike, just off Concord Street.
That was an experience, Tyson, and you and I have talked in the past about your experience at Tyson. I think it led to being able to deal with a lot of different people from different economics, social, because we had it all. Of course, there wasn't any integration then, but everything else, rich, poor, poverty, middle, and that was a real experience. I liked Tyson.
Was Mr. Walker, John Walker's father, still principal?
Yeah, he sure was. I had a run-in or two with him, and he was always right, and I was always wrong, but it wasn't anything serious.
Yeah.
And he and I had a great rapport after I settled down a little bit. He was, I don't know what you would say he was beloved, but he sure as heck was respected, and probably as much, well, more so than any education person I had in growing up and going to school.
And after Tyson, where did you go?
West High School.
What year did you finish there?
1955.
All right. West was a new high school then.
That was the first graduating, as they called it, graduating class. The reason that I and many others went to Tyson in the 9th grade, there was a dividing line, which was if you lived west of Concord Street, generally speaking, you went to west that first year it was open and would be in the 9th grade. Kind of ironic in a way, I guess, because Concord Street was about as far as from our office to the post office from Tyson, and everybody else east of there went to Tyson. So
in the 9th grade.
9th grade, and I don't know how long that lasted, but West had 9th graders from the day it opened.
All right. And did you have good teachers at West?
Yes, I did. We were very fortunate at West. We were told, or the scuttlebutt, whatever, that when Knoxville High had shut down, that somehow, some way, that more of the real good teachers at Knoxville High School got assigned to West. I never really knew why, but there were some really good teachers at West, and I know that West High School had a unbelievable number of people that were exempt from first quarter freshman English at UT because there was some kind of test that if you did so well, you didn't have to take first quarter English, and that was because we had a Mr. Sanders who was highly respected within academics, but also just as a teacher. He taught English, and so many seniors at West that year that went on to UT were exempt. I, of course, did not make the exemption list.
And I suspect you still have friends from Tyson and West that you run around with even to this day, don't you?
Well, I do, but not as many, obviously, because many of them have moved on. Not that many, I guess, have passed away, but there have been some, obviously, and I guess the people that I went to school with that I'm closer to, see more of, would probably Gilbert Levison and Matthew Samuel McClellan.
The clothier.
The clothier. He was 2 years behind me, but I still see a few of them, but it's not as often. We've been pretty good about having class reunions.
After high school, what did you do, Snake?
Well, I went to the University of Tennessee.
All right.
And I majored. You know, I was going to go into engineering. I'd taken all these courses in high school that would lead to that, but for whatever reason, during that summer after I got out of high school, I guess I was following along with everybody. A lot of people said they were going to go to business school and major in transportation. So I said, okay, that's what I'll do. And I got over there, and somewhere along the line, I took up an interest in accounting and graduated with a degree in accounting. And I went to work down in Chattanooga with a CPA firm and it was a great environment. I've been pretty blessed in all my different places. I've had places I'd rather be or not be, but I was always around people that I could, that were easy to get along with for the most part, and they were great.
What was the name of the firm?
Hazlitt, Lewis, and Beater. It was the largest CPA firm in Chattanooga at that time, and remained so for many, many years thereafter, even though some of the national people had moved in. I have not had any contact with those folks in a long time, but I sort of stayed in touch with them when I'd get down there on some legal matters. I'd stop by the office, but I don't know. I've told you, probably others, it's probably the most selfish thing that I've ever done to pull out of there and go to law school with a 2-year-old. Unbeknownst to me at the time the decision was made, another one on the way that showed up at the end in December at the end of the first quarter of law school. But I kept thinking that I wanted to give that a shot, and I didn't want to wake up someday like I am here today and say, wonder what that would have been like. So that's how I went to law school. I didn't know a lawyer. The only ones I knew, I knew a handful of people that had gone in front of me that I had been in high school or undergraduate, but that's how I got to law school and how I got out.
When did you start law school?
Fall quarter of 1961.
So how long had you worked in Chattanooga with the accounting firm?
14 or 15 months, I guess. I worked right up till I was moving up here. I'd moved Patty out of Chattanooga. She came up here and stayed with our son Jeff and with her parents who lived right across the street from your parents. And I stayed in Chattanooga, and I was trying to get out of debt and save up as much money as I could because we didn't, there was no job. And as I recall correctly, they discouraged first quarter. Of course, we were on quarters then, not semester. They discouraged part-time work for law students the first quarter or two. So that's how that came about. We moved into Sutherland Village. I don't know how many people will remember it, but it was Army barracks, old World War II Army barracks. Each one had 4, you could call them apartments. There must have been 50 of them down there.
They were just west of West High School.
Yeah, and subsequently they built those 2-story brick apartments on the same land, and I thought, golly, how nice that would have been. And then they've now subsequently torn them down, and they have those athletic fields down there. But living in Sutherland Village was an experience.
Do you recall with fondness or otherwise any of your professors in law school here? And I guess we ought to mention you were at UT Law School.
Yes. I was not a good student. I had concentration problems. It didn't take much to distract me. But I do have fond recollections of several of those teachers. First teacher I ever knew was Dr. Elvin Overton.
E.O. Overton.
And that was because he shot snooker at Ballas Pool Hall about every day at lunchtime and at the end of the workday. And I had been known to be in there on occasion. And I knew him before I ever went to law school. I knew him, I suppose, or was acquainted with him before I may have still been in high school. But he used to come down there, and he was very quiet, soft-spoken. He kind of lowly whistled to himself.
Mm. When did you start playing pool?
I don't know. I was a child prodigy. I don't want to be bragging about this, but I was. And I don't know how. It's just something that I couldn't do anything else but play pool and ping pong.
All right. Who else do you remember amongst your professors?
Well, of course, everybody remembers. We called him Colonel Warner, but everybody subsequently he became Dean, and Dean Warner.
Taught real property.
Yeah, and he was a great teacher. Now, I guess my favorites were Forrest Lacey, and he taught mostly commercial courses, and Martin Ferrick. Ferrick and I got along well, but he was bullied a lot of people. I never will forget one day we were in domestic relations. And I guess this may have been the day that whatever clicked between us clicked, because he started going down and he would call on people in that Yankee twang of his. And if he called on you to review the case, to sign the case, and you didn't know it or didn't have it, out.
He'd throw you out of class.
Oh, yeah. He'd throw you out of class. And I sat next to Jim Clayton. And Jim, he called on Jim. He was next in line. And Jim started trying to give excuses that he didn't have it. Why? Out. And he looked down and says, Cain. And I looked up at him, and I folded my book up. I didn't say a word. I just got up and left, because I knew he was going to. I didn't. But anyway, I would go in there and visit with him and shoot the breeze with him. When I was taking, he was notorious that legal bib, which he said nobody could pass, and he was correct.
What was his exam like in legal bib?
Oh, it was unreal.
Sort of a scavenger hunt.
Well, yeah, and it was a scavenger hunt all over the law school, and he'd stand up in the library. He had a big stick like a whip or something, and you'd be moving along, and he'd take that stick and slam it down on the table and just jump out. I remember one time I was studying in the library back in the back, and he was teaching legal bib to the next people. Everybody that believes that, stand up. Everybody that doesn't believe that, stand up. Everybody that didn't stand up, out. And one day, he yelled back at me. I'm back there studying. He said, Cain, what do you think? And I don't know what my response was, but I really did like him. And Forrest Lacey, he used to come up and play cards with us in the lounge, and on occasion drink beer with us. Mm-hmm. But he was fair as he could be in class.
How about other lawyers of note that you were in law school with?
Well, there were several very successful, very some of them. There's some of them just really, really great students. I can think of at least 5, and I'm sure I'm going to leave somebody out, that became judges, distinguished judges. Charlie Susano graduated, as I recall, a quarter before I did. And we know about his success as a lawyer and as an appellate judge. Dick Ladd and I went from day one to the end of it. He became chancellor for many years up in the Tri-Cities area. And of course, our partner, we've talked about, and who I still remain in awe of him somewhat, is Wheeler Rosenbaum. Billy Joe White became chancellor up in Claiborne and Campbell. And Billy Joe and I, as a matter of fact, he and his wife lived in Sutherland Village. Then there's Gene Eblin. I think he might have got out a couple of years before I did. I mean, quarters, but he's been criminal court judge in Roane County for 40 years or more. And there's somebody, Dwayne Snodgrass, I think, became a judge up in the Tri-Cities area, maybe Sessions. But there was a lot of really bright guys in that
How about
class.
Ben Hupper? I
forgot about Ben. Ben and I met the first day of law school and became close friends throughout. And Ben was he's been on the bench now, I guess, 25, I don't know, 20 or 30 years. And I'm sure, I feel like I'm forgetting or leaving out somebody else. I'm glad you reminded me about Ben, because I guess through law school, Ben and I were close as any of those others as far as studying together and that kind of thing.
Were you also in school with Jim Clayton?
Yeah. Jim had been there for a while, and I don't know what happened. And he came back and started up, and he was in several classes, and he had gone part-time, you might say. But I think he graduated at or about the time I did. And I got to know Jim pretty well in law school. He and his brother had those car lots out there on Clinton Highway. I remember a couple of times he took a private airplane, and law students, as many as 3 of us or 4, to High Point, North Carolina, to go to a car auction. He took us over there to drive cars back. And we did that a couple of times. I think back on it, I must have been nuts to have flown in that airplane. He had one law student had been a navigator in the United States Air Force, and he was our navigator going over. Now, I don't know how Clayton got back, because that guy was driving a car too. And we got paid $15 to drive a car. Well, that was big money back then.
Yeah. What year did you graduate from law school?
December of '63. I went 9 quarters straight through. Wheeler did not go to summer school. At least 1 or perhaps 2 he went, and that's why he and I didn't graduate at the same time, but we started at the same time.
What did you do when you got out of law school?
Well, I went looking for a job. I had 2 small children. I was indebted. I'd borrowed as much money as you could borrow back then from banks, so you didn't have any government money that you could get. And Mother and Daddy had helped a lot, but helped out with groceries and that kind of thing. I didn't have a monthly stipend. And Patty's parents helped a lot with the children, keeping them. So when we had I went to work at Cheek, Taylor & Groover. I went all over East Tennessee looking for a job. I just walk in, and I say I didn't know any lawyers. I knew Lou Wolf. He had just got out not long before I did. I knew Frank Flynn Jr. because we'd gone to undergrad together, and I sort of knew Jimmy Jarvis, but not real well. I knew his cousin Frank, a.k.a. Porky Calloway, but I knew Jimmy, but I didn't know any lawyers, and we're none in my background, so I went everywhere, all up East Tennessee, and I hit a time when and it wasn't just me, I don't think, that there was much of a demand. There's one of those spells in there where it's kind of slow for young lawyers. It kicked up a year or so later, but I was wrong time. But I ended up going to Cheek, Taylor & Groover. I went in there 2 or 3 times. I knew that John Lockridge had been there and had left, and I knew that Joe Guess had been there and left. So I figured if I kept pestering him, I might be able to hang on, which I did for 12 years. All
right, and you might tell us who the members of Cheek, Taylor & Groover were.
Robert L. Cheek, Calvin Taylor, and Bill Groover.
What kind of practice did they have?
Excuse me, it was a very broad personal injury and insurance defense practice. They were all about the same age. They'd all been in the service. They got out of UT Law School about the same time. They all three, I think, did adjusting work after law school, which was not uncommon back then because a lot of the law firms did adjusting work. In fact, I did a bunch of it that's how I learned how to investigate a lawsuit. I think Frantz McConnell may have done some adjusting. I know poor Cox did. I know that, I'm trying to think of somebody else. There were a lot of independent small insurance carriers back then, and they needed somebody to handle their claims, and and that was one of the things they did. But they had some regular defense work, and Calvin and Bob had a pretty good plaintiff's practice, and I helped get those cases ready and even tried a few, and so I was exposed to early on to plaintiff versus defense as far as what I like to call good old-fashioned car wrecks.
All right, and where did you go after that?
Well, I went across the street. I didn't think I was getting as far down in future advancement as I thought, so I decided it was time to pull out. It was a tough decision. I got these two kids and still about out of debt. So I knew that Bob Cassom he had some offices over in the Park National Bank, really nice offices because that was a relatively new building. And Lewis Foster, who I knew, and Shannon Faulkner, who I knew and friends with. Lewis decided to go to Edgerton McAfee, and Shannon went to O'Neill, Parker, and Williams, if I recall. And Bobby knew I was looking around to make a move, and it was kind of one of those just happened. And so I went across. We started sharing expense. A couple of months later, we had another person that came along, took the third office. That would have been Herb Monsieur. So it was Castle, Cain, and Monsieur for about 2.5 years, and we did our own things, whatever. Herb, of course, trying to get criminal work. He had been an assistant attorney general. Bobby had a lot of varied clientele, and in fact, often asked me to work it up or handle it or do whatever or get it ready for trial, which I did on. And so that was a source of some income from that. Plus, I had an insurance company or two that continued to send me some business. And so I was there about 2.5 years, I guess, 3 years.
Where did you go next?
Well, I went to Keelan Lehman. I was getting lazy. I felt like I need something a little more structured. I need something to kick me up a notch. And the money was not that much but I guess I just wanted to do something a little more structured. So Earl and I had gone to law school together. He was a little bit ahead of me. And,
Earl Lehman?
Yeah, and I don't know how we came together, but anyway, I ended up moving over to Keelan Lehman and stayed there until I came here. I guess that would have been 6 or 7 years there.
1985, you came over here.
Yeah.
Actually, the offices were over in the Valley Fidelity Bank building.
Yeah.
How long did you stay at Frantz McConnell? Till this day?
Well, I haven't said I'm retired, but I guess I am since I don't have any cases and have not had any new ones since the last ones I disposed of in 2013. So I guess I'm retired.
But you still have an office here.
Well, as long as you'll keep it. I asked Don if he'd let me stay to give me, if he decided he needed that office, to give me a fortnight and I have it cleared out. But I could probably do it in a day or two. But I just like to come up and look out the window and offer advice if anybody feels like they need any, and visit with the people that.
Over the years, what kind of law practice have you had?
Well, it's been civil, a lot of trial work. When I was with Cheek Tucker Gruber, I was involved. I mean, I did a lot of stuff there that I even did domestic work there. The only New Year's resolution I ever kept was 1980, and I swore I'd never take another domestic case, and I've kept that resolution. But I did plaintiffs, defendants, some small corporations, and then as the years moved along, from beginning with Keeley and Lehman and up till here, I didn't intend to, but it seemed like it just where the chips fell, I became more and more of a, as they say, a insurance defense attorney. I never thought of myself as an insurance defense attorney. I always thought of myself as an attorney who tried lawsuits. But whatever you called it. But that's basically, over the years, in the last few years, I guess every file I had was a lawsuit. That's how it began. Of course, as you know, we don't get to try as many as we used to. But that's not a bad thing, I suppose. It's probably a good thing for litigants to take all the pressure off of them.
Do you have any way of estimating how many trials you participated in?
No. I don't, I've thought about that over the years occasionally, and I thought about that when we were discussing this interview, and I don't know. I've never kept score. I don't remember many of them, unless something bizarre or funny happened or unusual result. But between the cases that were actually tried and the cases that nearly got tried, if you had them all, it'd be several hundred, I suppose.
At the beginning of your career, were more lawsuits being tried, that is, back in the 60s and 70s, than there are now?
Many more.
Oh.
Many more. You could go to the courthouse about any day, and all three circuits would be at trial. We had some great judges. I was very fortunate, Arthur, and you have been too. I had what I think of two sets of circuit court judges during my career, beginning with Judge Haynes, Judge Cole, and Judge Mahood, who were all good judges, very good judges. Then they began to retire all at about the same time, and then we had Wheeler, Dale Workman, and Harold Wimberly, all good judges. And I had great respect for all of them, and never got in any trouble with any of them. I think they were wrong a few times, but my guess is they were right a whole lot more times in my stuff. I can't really think of a time where I thought they had really made a mistake on a client of mine or a case of mine. But so I was very fortunate in Knox County to have those three judges, or those six judges. And most of the work I did was in the circuit court. I did do some chancery work, but well, actually a fair amount of chancery work, but not as much as circuit.
Did you try cases all over East Tennessee?
Yeah, I did. As a matter of fact, I suppose if I kept score, which I didn't, I tried probably as many in the surrounding counties, if you totaled all those up, as in Knox County.
What, Blunt, Anderson,
Roane,
Sevier,
Loudon, even Hamlin, Jefferson. All the counties that surround Knox County, plus a few of those counties are just beyond. I tried them in all of them.
Do you have some trials that stand out in your mind today?
Well, you and I talking earlier about that case out in front of Doyle High School that we got, our clients got blasted on, you and I and Dalton. Dalton Town. I can't remember the facts of that case except realistically and objectively, we shouldn't have had to pay anything on that case, anybody, but it was a young girl got killed, and I guess that was it. I guess the case that I made a name for myself, at least for 24 hours, was that one where I had Cal Sand was truck dropped down off the interstate down on top of a parked stopped car on Wise Garber Road. I don't know if I should mention the name of the plaintiff, but he and I became friends sometime thereafter. But he was sitting there in the morning traffic, minding his own business, listening to the radio. And my young boy was driving this Cal Sand 10-wheelers headed east toward Knoxville during the morning traffic. And traffic begins to slow, and he puts his brakes on, and he has no brakes. They're dead, gone. So he got over in the median, the grass, and just sort of hydroplaned through there and went over, and I guess he must have knocked down something because that truck dropped down on the plaintiff sitting there in his car. They had to get the jaws of life or whatever they called it back then to pry him out of the car. Fortunately, he was not severely injured, permanently injured. The only permanent injury I can recall, he had a puncture wound on his thigh where something come down out of there. But that case, Dr. Frank Speckhart inspected the brake cylinder and said that was no way to have known that this was going to happen. And it wasn't like he'd had any brake trouble coming up from Chattanooga. I had one witness that saw his tail lights come on, or brake lights. So anyway, I got a defendant's verdict. And I hadn't got back to the office for, back in those days, you'd see lawyers out on the street coming and going. Before I got back to the office, people were talking about that case. And the plaintiffs never thought much about my defense. And Judge Haynes, who was a great judge, took that verdict away from me. There was one objection in the trial, 2-day trial, and that was me objecting to something that the plaintiff was testifying about. A psychologist had told him on hearsay, immediately sustained. We went down there to argue the case. I've got all this stack of stuff, whatever, to support against a motion for new trial. And Judge Haynes called that case last on the docket. And if I recall, and I'm thinking, but the Judge Haynes used to occasionally just stand up behind the bench.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there ready to go because I know there's no way that this case can be, a jury was out an hour or two, and before plaintiff's attorneys or I could utter a word that morning.
This was on the motion for new trial.
Yeah. 13th juror, he said, I'm going to give the plaintiffs a new trial. We're playing for a new trial. And I said, okay. And I was disappointed because I felt like I'd done, I'd prepared well and done well, and and so we're getting ready. It's coming down to the new trial. And we get about 2 or 3 weeks out, and as you know, it's difficult to get psyched up to go again on a trial the second time around. But I was getting psyched up again because the plaintiff's attorneys didn't think much of my defense then, and I guess later on. And so I'm about a week or 2 out from trial, and I'm getting people lined up, getting my young boy back up here to testify. I get a call from the insurance carrier one day and said, Snake, we've settled the case. I said, oh, okay.
So I was going to get to try it again.
No, but I was going to win it again, or at least I thought I might.
We talked a little bit earlier about some of the judges, especially the ones you've appeared before here in Knox County, our circuit judges. Are there judges from other counties that stand out in your mind as being good judges?
Good.
Yeah, we're not going to run down anybody today.
W.I. Davis, he was coming down the stretch, but I remember a lot of the lawyers senior to me in time. I always spoke very highly of him. I only had one or two cases there, but he was really a good judge.
Where was he?
He had Anderson County. You know, at some time along the way, those counties up there, Anderson split away. I don't know. I think he had some of those other counties like Campbell and.
Yeah, he was
Clayton.
from Tazewell, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he was. He was very good. I tell you, help me on the name. Great judge in Sevier County, Bill. What was his name? And a mustache. I think his name was Bill something. He was.
Oh yeah. Bill Holt.
He was a great judge.
I went to law school with Bill.
The only judge I ever thought that was very good, without naming any other names, in the Roan and Loudon and those guys, was Don McMurray. We didn't get to keep him as long as we wanted to because they promoted him or he got moved up to the Court of Appeals. He was a good judge. I've had, the only judge that ever called me down was a good friend of mine, and he properly should, I suppose. And then he apologized to me when I showed up back out in Anderson County. Was Buddy Scott. Buddy and I knew each other before either one of us even thought about going to law school. He called me down one day I was cross-examining an expert witness in a comp case, and I couldn't help it. He told me something, and I said, yeah, and that's what your sheriff had said out here. I think the sheriff had some problems. Buddy got on me about that, but I always got along with them, even if I didn't agree with them. If they ruled, I felt like if they ruled it, there wasn't any reason to argue anymore because they'd ruled. So I got along with all the judges. There were some I didn't much care for, but they may not have liked me either, but I was lucky in that respect.
Now let's talk a little bit about your family life. You're married to Patty Jenkins, the former Patty Jenkins.
Former Patty Russell Jenkins of Terrace Avenue, and prior to that, Whitehaven, Tennessee. Yeah. Her family. I don't know whether your parents moved up to Terrace on the other corner before or after they came there. They
before.
Came, so they were there when the Jenkins showed up.
Yeah.
It's a great neighborhood, kind of like my neighborhood, like kids around, playing, dogs. But I had, Pat and I got married, we were relatively young, I guess. Of course, people got married younger back then than maybe they do now, but we have 3 children. Jeff is a workers' comp specialist, whatever. He's got does a lot of mediations at the Department of Labor. Ashley, Jeff and Laura, his wife Laura, teaches at Bearden Elementary. They've got daughter and a son. I'm taking them tonight to see Annie.
The movie.
No, the play.
Play, oh, all right, over at the Tennessee.
Yeah. Then I've got Ashley and her husband Stuart. They live in Atlanta. Ashley's got some kind of a job with the schools down there that she does assistant nurse or something. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but she does that. She needs to augment her money. She's high maintenance. She's either thinking about to do something. It'll cost more money, and Stuart, I love him like my own flesh and blood. They've got 2 sons. You know them both, Jay and Alex. Both of them UT. Jay graduated about 2 years ago from UT. He's a CPA now in Atlanta with Price Waterhouse. Alex will graduate, we hope, in May. And then I've got Whitney, Dr. Whitney Jenkins Cain. over in Raleigh. She's got a PhD and master's. She's married to a great guy who's a few years her senior. He was a bankruptcy judge for many, many years. Highly respected in that field. I mean, he goes and talks and teaches. But about a year and a half ago, Campbell Law School, which is a lot bigger than, more prestigious than we might think there in Raleigh, came to him and asked him to become dean. So he's been the dean of the law school there the last year and a half. They've got 3 children. They were here for right after Christmas, 10, 8, and 6. You can imagine 10, 8, and 6. And that's it, I guess. That's 7 grandchildren, and all of them are still married to one another, although I guess that's a day-to-day thing. You never know.
All right, and what do you do when you weren't practicing law or today?
Well, when I was actively practicing law, I used to go trout fishing frequently in the mountains, and occasionally over on the Little Tennessee. I did a fair amount of fly fishing. I had that cabin at Elkmont for 10 years, which I loved and still think about it. Still have some anger toward the Park Service for throwing us out. I took up golf, you might say I took up golf toward the end of the Elkmont days. I'd played a little bit as a youngster, but I was never any good. I could always putt very good, but I wasn't ever able to get on the green. You know, like one time we were playing out Holston, and Jerry Becker was playing. He's worse than I am. We were all standing up on the green, we're getting ready to glove off, and he finally pulls up and says, "Have y'all been here long?" So that, I used to hunt some, but I got to where I didn't want to kill anything anymore. And I don't have any problem with people that do hunt, as long as they obey the rules. But trout fishing, I took up tennis back in the tennis boom, and I've played a lot of tennis. And I was almost mediocre, but not quite. Pool shooting days ended when I guess the Elks Club shut down. That was the Elks Club downtown? Yeah, lunchtime.
Was that a big hangout for lawyers here?
Yeah, it really was. It's something that it's not been replaced or anything, because young lawyers could become members there. And the older lawyers that came in there, they had liquor by the drink then for a while, and they would come down there and have an after-work cocktail, and you could meet with and become friends with older lawyers. And there used to be discussion about the Elks Club settlements, because they claimed more settlements for negotiating the Elks Club, and you could sit down there and you could give your side of the case, and I could give my side of the case, and almost have a jury. What do you think? And that, I don't know when they closed down there and they moved out on Lonis Road or somewhere, but that was the end of those days, because then there are a lot of other places where you could stop on the way home if you were inclined to do so. But I mean, that was where young and old lawyers became closer.
Where was the Elks Club located?
On the corner of State and Clinch.
It's gone now.
It's been long gone. There's a neat old building. It had 3 or 4 floors in it, or maybe 4. Well, 3. Actually, maybe it did have 4.
And that was well known in its days as a hangout for lawyers.
Yeah.
Not the official headquarters of the Knoxville Bar, but the unofficial headquarters.
You know, that's true because most of the lawyers that were doing the kind of work I did, practice I had, belonged to the Elks Club. And it didn't cost much to join. The dues were nominal. But the camaraderie that was available there at lunchtime, it was open to the public for lunch on the first floor and or the basement at lunchtime. And the second floor was where I always ate lunch. Had a legendary waiter up there, Lester Blakeney, I think. Anyway, and they had a pool table, a snooker table, and a bunch of them played cards, but you could order lunch and eat there, and there was quite a number of people, and not all of them were playing cards or shooting pool. A lot of kibitzers were there.
You've always been interested in UT athletics?
Yeah, I sure have. Well, you know, you and I have sat together for what, 20 years, 25 years, 30, long time.
Yeah, several years.
I went 57 years without missing a home game. Not a one. Now, I didn't deliberately say I'm going today because I'm going to keep a record going. It wasn't like I was record. I just didn't ever have anything else to do on Saturday afternoon. And then I had a bypass surgery, and I had to miss a game. First game I missed, that Arkansas game, was 5 overtimes. I got Patty to drive me up on the strip at halftime. I wanted to see what it looked like during a football game since I'd never seen it during a football game.
Was it deserted?
Well, it was, but there, you drive down the street, you could see in the bars and restaurants that were open, if they had a window facing, you could see people sitting around, presumably watching the game.
Your nickname, and a lot of people think it's your real name, is Snake. How did you acquire that name?
I don't. And when I was in junior high school, the neighborhood kids played together. Hugh Dupree and Gordon Soper and some of them. Mr. Dupree started calling me Shaky because of the football referee named Shaky Cain that seemingly had all the big SEC games back then. So he started calling me Shaky, and I was called Shaky from junior high to high school, and my annual people say Shaky. Well, 2 weeks after I got out of high school, I took my first job at the Pure Oil Station down on Cumberland where the Taco Bell is now. And I've been there about 3 or 4 days, and the assistant manager, who was a student also, had been on vacation. And at the end of the workday, another guy that worked there full time, and I was sitting around behind the station. I was sitting up on a stack of tires, and Shorty Steele, Leon Shorty Steele, great high school teammate of John Major's. He walked around the corner, he looked up and said, "Jim, who's that?" He said, "Well, Mr. Van Hoosier hired him. He looks like a GD snake sitting up on those tires." Well, I weighed about 120 pounds and probably 5, 10, or 11. I grew 10 inches after I got out of high school, but I was skinny as the dickens. And I don't know how, but from that day on, it was like a flood tide. Shaky went out one, and Snake came in. I don't know how or why, but that's exactly how it happened.
How old were you then?
I was 17. I was 8. I was 17 when I graduated from high school, but I turned 18 in the fall of '55 when I started UT.
Have you enjoyed practicing law?
Yeah, it's been a good ride. I mean, there've been ups and downs like you expect, but I like lawyers. I could probably, if you gave me an hour, sit here and count on one hand lawyers that I don't like or didn't like, but I'm pretty sure they don't know that I didn't like them. But I mean, it's been fun. I could have done a lot of things better. I could have done things worse. but and I came along when they were still trying lawsuits, which is really what I went to law school hoping to be. I didn't expect to be Melvin Belli. That was the big guy back then, but I just wanted to go try cases. As it turned out, not deliberately, I ended up being civil. I didn't set out to be primarily a defense attorney or a criminal attorney defense. I just wanted to be a lawyer that went to courthouse, tried cases, and I was able to do that, for which I'm very thankful.
Anything else you want to add?
No, I don't know. I'd like to. Oh, one thing. A young lawyers, I was abused mentally as a bunch of my contemporaries were, but an older guy here in town. He was a great lawyer, whose name I shall not mention, but they will all know who of I speak. And I made a point to, at that time in my career, he would embarrass you in front of your senior members and just bully you. I finally figured him out, though. That was all he was. But I resolved then that I would never, ever deliberately say something to a younger attorney to, in a sense, put them down. If I did, I didn't know I was doing it because of that. And that's one thing I tried to do, is be upfront with everybody. Straight shooter, I guess they used to call them. That's how I shot pool, straight shoot. But so it's been a good ride, and I don't have any regrets that I can think of. If they are, it'd be minuscule.
Good. Thank you.